Social media was once imagined as a digital gathering place where truth could be shared and wisdom could rise. Yet in practice, it has become something closer to a carnival mirror, distorting reality until the loudest voice looks the largest, and confidence masquerades as knowledge. Here, attention is the only currency, and what is most rewarded is rarely what is most true. Why do the bold proclamations of the ignorant travel so much further than the enlightened insights of the well-informed? Why does outrage surge to the top of our feeds while reason languishes in obscurity? The answer lies not in a new flaw of human nature, but in an old one, amplified by technology. Italian economist Carlo Cipolla, in his book entitled The 5 Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, argued that stupidity is not a rare defect, but a constant force of history. The Dunning-Kruger effect, first described by the psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, confirmed what intuition already knew. The less we know about something, the more we think we know. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German Lutheran pastor and anti-Nazi dissident, warned that stupidity, not malice, poses the greater threat to civilization. Today, their insights converge in our screens. Algorithms are no neutral observers. They are accelerants. They take every impulsive outrage, every shallow certainty, every fragment of misinformation, and multiply it, rewarding stupidity with virality. The result is not merely a society where truth is ignored, but one where truth must struggle to survive. This video will explore why stupidity spreads faster than wisdom, why confidence outshouts humility, and why the architecture of our digital world has tilted the scale so heavily against truth. The mind is a labyrinth. Let's walk its shadows together. Carlo M. Cipolla, an Italian economic historian with a wry sense of humor and a gift for brutal clarity, once reduced the mystery of human folly into a framework so sharp that it reads almost like satire. His essay, The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, written in 1976, is deceptively simple. Yet it captures a truth more unsettling than most psychological studies ever dared to admit. Stupidity is not an accident of history, nor a fringe malfunction of the human mind. It is, as he put it, one of the most powerful forces shaping human affairs. Cipolla began with his first law. Always and inevitably, everyone underestimates the number of stupid individuals in circulation. It sounds like a joke, a quip you might find in the margins of a cynical diary. But it is not. It is a mathematical principle dressed as humor, warning us that our baseline assumptions about human rationality are dangerously optimistic. We believe stupidity is rare, but it is not. We treat it as an outlier, but it is the mean. In every boardroom, in every parliament, in every corner of the internet, the stupid are not a handful at the edges. They are the tide itself. And Cipolla sharpened the blade further with his second law. The probability that a certain person will be stupid is independent of any other characteristic of that person. Here lies the most uncomfortable truth. Education, wealth, profession, ideology. None of these inoculate against stupidity. The professor can be as stupid as the factory worker, the CEO as stupid as the intern. The blue checkmark does not signal wisdom any more than the anonymity of a comment thread guarantees foolishness. Stupidity is distributed universally, striking without regard for merit or privilege. On social media, this law is laid bare. The people we assumed would know better often don't. Authority is no guarantee of clarity. Then came the third law, the one Cipolla believed to be the most dangerous. A stupid person is the most dangerous type of person. Why? Because stupidity is not harmless error. It is not simply ignorance. Ignorance may be corrected with knowledge. Misunderstanding may be refined with dialogue. But stupidity resists both. Do you agree with Cipolla that stupidity can be more dangerous than deliberate malice? Why or why not? Share your thoughts in the comments. Cipolla defined the stupid not merely as those who lack intelligence, but those whose actions harm others, while bringing no benefit to themselves. They act against the interests of both themselves and the collective, and yet, perversely, they persist. This destructive pattern, irrational, unpredictable, contagious, makes stupidity more corrosive than malice. Malice at least follows a logic. Stupidity explodes without reason, scattering damage across a society with no clear target. When we map this onto the digital world, Cipolla's observation takes on apocalyptic tones. Online, the stupid do not merely act, they amplify. A tweet designed to harm others and embarrass its author should, in a rational world, fade into oblivion. Instead, algorithms seize it, replicate it, spread it. The harm multiplies, the pointlessness spreads, and stupidity, like a virus, mutates through memes, comments, shares, and stitched videos. Cipolla warned that stupidity is the most dangerous human force. Today, technology has given that force wings. The fourth law of stupidity is equally brutal. Non-stupid people always underestimate the damaging power of stupid individuals. This underestimation is not merely naive optimism. It is the reason stupidity thrives. Rational people imagine that others will eventually recognize nonsense for what it is. They assume that misinformation will collapse under its own absurdity, that trolls will run out of energy, that lies will be too fragile to endure. But the history of digital communication proves otherwise. Misinformation does not collapse, it metastasizes. Outrage does not fade, it intensifies. Trolls do not run out of energy, they multiply, fueled by attention. The rational underestimation of stupidity is not just a private mistake. It is a collective failure that allows stupidity to dominate the conversation. And finally, the fifth law. A stupid person is the most dangerous type of person. Cipolla returned to his earlier claim with deliberate force. He wanted his readers to understand. Stupidity does not simply coexist with history, it drives it. Wars are lost not only through cunning enemies, but through stupid allies. Economies collapse not only through corruption, but through ill-conceived decisions made by leaders who believed they were being clever. And in the age of social media, entire cultures drift toward noise and outrage, not because they choose it, but because they underestimate the gravitational pull of stupidity. Cipolla's framework might once have been read as an amusing satire of human folly, a bitter laugh at the expense of the bumbling masses. Today, it reads as prophecy. His laws explain not only the persistence of stupidity, but its dominance in the digital age. They remind us that stupidity is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of destruction, the willful act of broadcasting harm without any benefit, dressed up as confidence, humor, or outrage. Consider how these laws manifest in the ecosystem of your social media feed. A baseless conspiracy theory, repeated endlessly, gains credibility not through evidence, but through sheer repetition. A cruel joke at someone's expense circulates until its harm becomes normalized. A bold but false claim receives more likes, shares, and comments than a cautious, evidence-based analysis. Each of these cases demonstrates Cipolla's insight. Stupidity is not accidental static. It is the dominant current. And the truly rational underestimate its reach, assuming that truth will win simply because it is truth. But Cipolla would warn you, truth does not win by default. Stupidity is not a sideshow. It is the main act. And unless we recognize its laws, we are condemned to live under its rule. If you're liking this video, please like and subscribe now. It helps the channel to grow. Thank you for watching. If Cipolla gave us the laws of stupidity, the psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger gave us its portrait. In their now famous 1999 study, they revealed a paradox so disarming that it reshaped how we think about competence itself. Those who know the least are often the most certain. The phenomenon became known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, and nowhere does it flourish more extravagantly than on social media. At its core, the Dunning-Kruger effect is simple. Incompetence robs people not only of the ability to perform well, but also of the ability to recognize their own incompetence. If you know little about psychology, you are less likely to recognize just how much you don't know, and thus more likely to declare yourself an expert after watching a single video or skimming a few articles. Ignorance, in this sense, comes wrapped in a cloak of certainty. And certainty, in a digital marketplace of attention, is the most valuable currency of all. Consider how information travels online. Posts drenched in confidence, written with the clarity of absolute conviction, are far more likely to spread than those filled with nuance, caution, or humility. A scientist may hedge. The data suggest a possible correlation, though further research is needed. Meanwhile, a self-styled influencer, utterly unburdened by humility, proclaims, "This is the truth they don't want you to know." Which statement travels faster? Which garners more clicks, shares, and comments? The answer, painfully obvious, confirms what Dunning and Kruger discovered in the laboratory. People gravitate towards certainty, not accuracy, and so the digital landscape becomes tilted. The competent, aware of complexity, speak softly. The incompetent, blind to complexity, shout. One voice is careful, the other reckless, and the reckless voice dominates the room. The problem is not that people want to be misled, but that certainty feels safer than doubt, even when it is a dangerous illusion. This is why the Dunning-Kruger effect is not a private quirk of psychology, but a collective crisis of communication. The incompetent are not merely mistaken, they are amplified. Their misplaced confidence becomes contagious, shaping conversations, influencing elections, fueling conspiracies. The loudest voices online are not always the most malicious nor the most informed, but often the least self-aware. And because attention rewards confidence, social media has become a vast marketplace where certainty sells and doubt dies quietly in the corner. It is tempting to mock these figures, the self-proclaimed experts who collapse complex realities into single-sentence slogans, who radiate authority without ever having earned it. Yet the danger of mockery is underestimation. Dunning and Kruger showed us that these individuals are not merely laughable, they are influential. Their overconfidence does not stay confined to their feeds. It seeps into public discourse, warping perceptions of reality, drowning out those who know just enough to hesitate. But this is not only about them. The Dunning-Kruger effect lurks within all of us. Each of us is blind to the edges of our ignorance. Each of us is more confident in some domains than we should be. The danger of the digital age is not only that it gives a megaphone to the incompetent, but that it tempts us to confuse confidence with competence, in ourselves as much as in others. We fall for the loudest voice because certainty feels like truth, even when it is a mirage. Imagine scrolling through your feed. You see two posts on climate change. One is cautious, filled with graphs, probabilities, and citations, but it is dense, slow, and requires effort to process. The other is bold, visceral, and absolute. Climate change is a hoax, or on the other side, we are guaranteed extinction in 10 years. Which one grabs your attention? Which one sparks a reaction, whether agreement or outrage? The algorithm doesn't care which is true, it only cares which is engaging. And certainty, whether it is packaged as denial or doom, always engages more than the delicate art of intellectual humility. This is the cruel paradox of the Dunning-Kruger age. Truth whispers, ignorance shouts, and algorithms amplify the shouting. The cautious voices of competence are not absent. They are simply drowned out by the roar of the overconfident. And the longer we mistake volume for authority, the deeper we slide into a culture where stupidity not only survives, but thrives. What Dunning and Kruger revealed in an academic study has become the lifeblood of our digital age. Their findings were never meant to explain TikTok, Twitter, or YouTube, but they do so with eerie precision. The incompetent overestimate themselves. The competent underestimate themselves. And the world, hungry for certainty, listens to the wrong side. But pause for a moment and notice what this means for you. You live in an environment that conditions you, every day, to equate confidence with credibility. The more time you spend online, the easier it becomes to forget that competence is often quiet, that truth is often hedged, that wisdom often carries the weight of uncertainty. You are trained by repetition and exposure to hear the loudest voice as the truest. And unless you resist this training, you will join the millions who confuse boldness for brilliance and mistake doubt for weakness. The Dunning-Kruger effect is not merely a description of human folly. It is a warning about the architecture of attention. It tells us that ignorance, when dressed in confidence, can outcompete intelligence clothed in humility. It tells us that stupidity, when broadcast with certainty, can overpower wisdom that whispers. And in the algorithmic agora of the present age, that warning is not theoretical. It is the world you inhabit every time you open your phone. What are some examples of the Dunning-Kruger effect that you've seen? Share your thoughts in the comments. If Cipolla gave us the law, and Dunning and Kruger gave us the portrait, then Silicon Valley wrote the script. What was once human folly has now been engineered into a system, refined with the precision of code. The algorithm, that invisible curator of our attention, does not sit in judgment of truth or falsity. It does not care for the wisdom of philosophers or the patience of historians. It cares only for one thing: engagement. And the easiest way to engage the human nervous system is outrage. This is not an accident. It is not even a side effect. It is design. Anger travels faster than joy, fear spreads more reliably than facts, and outrage outshouts nuance in every arena. The architects of social media did not invent these truths, but they codified them, writing them into the bones of the platforms you use every day. What keeps you scrolling, liking, and sharing is not wisdom. It is the spike of adrenaline when you feel offended, the jolt of dopamine when you react, the dark thrill of seeing your indignation mirrored by thousands of others. Algorithms reward what keeps you hooked, and nothing hooks like outrage. Consider the architecture of a feed. Each post is not weighed for truth, but for its potential to capture attention. The stronger the emotion, the more weight it carries. Subtlety withers, complexity starves, and what remains are the sharpened edges of human expression. The thoughtful essay withers in obscurity, while the furious outburst goes viral. In such a world, stupidity does not simply survive. It metastasizes, carried forward on the wings of our collective anger. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once warned that stupidity was more dangerous than malice, because stupidity spreads like a contagion, untethered from logic. The algorithm has turned this contagion into a pandemic. A single ignorant post, once confined to a dinner table or a bar, can now reach millions in hours. Outrage ensures its reproduction. Each comment, whether mocking or defending, signals to the system, this is engaging, amplify it. Even your resistance becomes fuel for the fire. The more you fight it, the stronger it grows. Do you believe engaging with online stupidity only strengthens it, or can resistance sometimes weaken its hold? Share your opinions in the comments. Outrage has another peculiar property. It creates community. It binds strangers together in shared fury, forging fleeting alliances of indignation. These alliances do not require truth. They require only an enemy. Whether the enemy is real or imagined matters less than the rush of collective anger. The algorithm recognizes this pattern and feeds it, nudging you into digital tribes defined not by what they love, but by what they hate. In such an economy, stupidity thrives because it gives people something to rally against, a scapegoat to share, a target to amplify. And because outrage spreads, stupidity is rewarded. Think of the countless viral posts built not on insight but on provocation. A poorly reasoned argument shouted with fury garners more attention than a well-researched explanation whispered in calm tones. A baseless accusation, bold and infuriating, becomes news before it is ever questioned. In this system, the line between attention and legitimacy dissolves. To be viral is to be real, no matter how false. Consider what this means for truth itself. Truth is slow. It requires context, patience, and often humility. Outrage is immediate. It requires only a trigger. In the battle between the two, the algorithm has tilted the scale decisively. Truth, with all its caution, arrives like a whisper. Outrage, with all its force, arrives like a storm. And the system amplifies the storm, drowning the whisper until it can no longer be heard. This is why Cipolla's and Dunning-Kruger's insights feel prophetic in the digital age. Stupidity, once dangerous because it was unpredictable, is now dangerous because it is engineered. The algorithm has weaponized our cognitive flaws. It magnifies the confidence of the incompetent, rewards the destructiveness of the stupid, and ensures that outrage, our most viral impulse, becomes the organizing principle of online life. And yet, the danger is not only what you see, but what you no longer see. For every outrage that dominates your feed, a quiet truth is buried. For every viral stupidity, a thoughtful perspective disappears. This is not censorship. It is starvation. Truth does not vanish because it is suppressed. It vanishes because it is ignored. In the digital marketplace, attention is the only currency, and outrage buys far more than wisdom ever can. Think about your own scrolling habits. How often do you pause on the careful post, the nuanced take, the article that complicates instead of clarifies? How often do you, instead, linger on the outrageous, the provocative, the infuriating? Each pause is a vote, each click a signal. You are not simply consuming the algorithm, you are feeding it, training it, teaching it that what you crave most is the rush of indignation. And the more it learns, the more it delivers. Outrage, once a fleeting human emotion, has become an infrastructure. It is the scaffolding of the digital world, the hidden skeleton beneath your feed. And because outrage is the ideal carrier for stupidity, stupidity has never had a more perfect host. Cipolla told us stupidity was underestimated. Dunning and Kruger told us incompetence was overconfident. Bonhoeffer warned us stupidity was more dangerous than malice. The algorithm, indifferent to all three, has proven them right in ways they could never have imagined. It has automated the amplification of stupidity, ensuring that what is most destructive, most incompetent, and most contagious rises always to the top. In 1943, while imprisoned by the Nazis, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote something astonishingly simple yet devastatingly clear. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. Coming from a man who stood against one of the most malicious regimes in history, this was no idle observation. Bonhoeffer, who would be executed for his resistance, understood evil intimately. He saw its violence, its ruthlessness, its calculated cruelty. Yet even he insisted, malice is not the greatest threat. Stupidity is. At first glance, the claim feels absurd. How can stupidity be more dangerous than the deliberate machinery of oppression? Malice at least intends harm. Stupidity often stumbles into it blindly. But Bonhoeffer's insight is that this blindness makes stupidity unassailable. You can reason with malice, negotiate with it, resist it with counterforce. Malice knows what it wants. Stupidity, by contrast, is not self-aware. It cannot be persuaded because it does not recognize its own nature. It cannot be contained because it does not know it is spreading. Malice has strategy. Stupidity has contagion. Bonhoeffer described stupidity not as a private flaw, but as a social condition. It arises, he argued, when people surrender their capacity for independent thought to the crowd, when they trade their judgment for belonging. Stupidity is not merely ignorance, it is the abdication of one's mind. In his time, this submission was to the Nazi state, a willingness to parrot slogans, to echo propaganda, to replace critical thought with obedience. In our time, it is the willingness to let algorithms decide what is worth our attention, to echo outrage, to surrender reflection to the frictionless momentum of the feed. The resonance is chilling. Bonhoeffer saw stupidity as a force that could turn entire populations into instruments of destruction without them ever realizing it. Today, the same force plays out in digital form. People become amplifiers for content they do not fully understand, soldiers in battles they never chose, foot soldiers of trends that vanish as quickly as they arrive. They are not malicious, but they are dangerous, for they lend their energy, their clicks, their shares to systems that profit from the spread of lies, division, and outrage. Bonhoeffer warned that stupidity is more dangerous than malice because it is impervious to reason. Malice knows the truth and chooses to oppose it. Stupidity does not recognize truth at all. When you argue with malice, you confront a foe. When you argue with stupidity, you face a void. Reason slides off it like water off stone. The more you push, the stronger its resistance grows, not because it understands, but because it does not. Online, this principle explains why so many debates collapse into frustration. The comment thread is not a forum for truth. It is a theater where stupidity multiplies, immune to evidence, immune to logic, immune even to mockery. Have you ever tried reasoning with stupidity online? How did that go? Leave your comments below. What Bonhoeffer could not have foreseen, though perhaps he intuited its possibility, is the technological amplification of this force. In his day, stupidity spread through propaganda, through radios, through mass rallies. Today, it spreads at the speed of light. What once required an army of propagandists now requires only an algorithm, a trending tab, a viral post. Bonhoeffer warned that stupidity, when it takes root in society, is more dangerous than evil itself. In the 21st century, we see his words realized with terrifying clarity. Stupidity has been given tools he never could have imagined. And yet, his insight also contains a subtle hope. If stupidity is not merely an individual defect, but a social condition, then it is not inevitable. It is fostered by environments that reward conformity and discourage reflection. In Nazi Germany, that environment was the totalitarian state. In our time, it is the architecture of digital platforms, where attention is currency, and outrage the most reliable way to earn it. But environments can be resisted, disrupted, redesigned. If stupidity thrives when people surrender their autonomy of thought, then the antidote lies in reclaiming it. Here lies the paradox. Bonhoeffer teaches us that stupidity is more dangerous than malice, but he also implies that it is not invincible. It flourishes when people allow themselves to be carried by the current. It withers when people learn to stand apart, to slow down, to think. To resist stupidity is not to eliminate ignorance. Ignorance is human. To resist stupidity is to refuse the abdication of one's mind, to remain sovereign in one's thought, even when the crowd demands surrender. So let us revisit his warning, not as a relic of wartime despair, but as a lens for our own crisis. Stupidity, more than malice, threatens the foundations of digital civilization. It is not the calculated deceivers alone who erode the fabric of truth, but the millions of ordinary users who amplify without reflection, who share without understanding, who react without pause. In this sense, we are all implicated. We are not passive victims of stupidity's contagion. We are its carriers. And perhaps that is Bonhoeffer's hardest truth. Stupidity is not an enemy out there waiting to be defeated. It is a temptation within us, a temptation to give up the burden of thinking, to let others, whether states or algorithms, think for us. Malice is easy to hate. Stupidity is harder because it wears familiar faces, including our own. After Cipolla's laws, after Dunning and Kruger's paradox, after Bonhoeffer's warning, one question remains. What now? If stupidity is underestimated, if confidence outshouts competence, if algorithms reward outrage and amplify folly, how do we resist without sinking into despair? How do we live wisely in a system designed to reward the opposite? The first step is to accept the terrain for what it is. The digital world is not neutral. It is not a library of knowledge, patiently waiting for your curiosity. It is a marketplace of attention, ruthless in its efficiency, indifferent to truth. To walk into this marketplace unprepared is to be manipulated by it. But to recognize its structure is to reclaim a fragment of power. Awareness does not dismantle the algorithm, but it changes your stance toward it. You become less of a participant, more of a witness, less a consumer, more a chooser. Second, remember that wisdom is slow. It does not announce itself in viral slogans. It does not thrive in the frictionless acceleration of feeds. Wisdom asks for silence, for patience, for the ability to sit with complexity without demanding immediate resolution. This is why truth feels so fragile online. It does not bend itself into outrage or compress itself into certainty. But fragility is not weakness. A seed is fragile, and yet it contains a forest. If you can cultivate the patience to value slowness in a fast world, you begin to reorient your life away from the logic of virality and toward the logic of growth. Third, reclaim the discipline of skepticism, not the performative skepticism of conspiracy culture, which doubts only what it wants to disbelieve, but the deeper skepticism that doubts even one's own instincts. Ask, why does this post make me feel outrage? Why does this certainty feel so seductive? Whose interest does this reaction serve? The stupid act without pause. The wise create pause. Every second of reflection is an act of resistance against the velocity of stupidity. Fourth, choose your amplifications carefully. You may not control what appears in your feed, but you control what you echo. Each share, each comment, each reaction is a vote cast in the invisible marketplace of attention. If stupidity thrives on amplification, then refusing to amplify it, even when mocking it, becomes a form of rebellion. Silence is not always complicity. Sometimes it is strategy. Sometimes the most radical act is to starve stupidity of the attention it craves. Finally, anchor yourself in something deeper than the feed. Stupidity is contagious because it appeals to the shallowest parts of the psyche. Outrage, fear, tribal belonging. Wisdom requires depth, books that slow you down, conversations that sharpen you, solitude that clarifies you. Bonhoeffer resisted not only with action but with thought, with prayer, with reflection. To resist stupidity today is not only to argue better online, but to build an interior life that cannot be colonized by algorithms. A mind that has roots is harder to sway. This is not a call to abandon technology, nor to retreat into cynicism. It is a call to inhabit technology differently, to treat it not as an oracle, but as a mirror, one that reveals not only the stupidity of others, but the temptation within yourself. For each of us at times has been the fool amplified by the system, the overconfident voice mistaken for authority, the carrier of contagion we swore we opposed. To see this clearly is painful, but pain, in this context, is clarity. Digital wisdom begins with humility, the recognition that you are vulnerable to the very forces you criticize. It matures into courage, The willingness to slow down when the world accelerates, to doubt when the crowd proclaims certainty, to fall silent when the mob demands outrage. And it flowers into resilience, the quiet conviction that while stupidity may dominate the surface, wisdom can endure beneath it, like roots waiting for their season. We cannot dismantle the architecture of social media overnight, but we can resist its logic. We can live differently within it. We can remind ourselves and each other that the measure of a life is not the number of impressions it leaves behind, but the depth of its truth. Virality fades, wisdom endures. Outrage burns quickly, clarity burns slowly, but illuminates longer. This is the paradox, the hidden hope. Technology has amplified stupidity beyond what Bonhoeffer could have imagined, but it has also amplified the possibility of wisdom. Never before have so many books, lectures, ideas, and communities of thought been available to so many, so quickly. The same machine that spreads outrage can spread insight. The same system that multiplies stupidity can, in rare but real moments, multiply truth. The difference lies not in the architecture alone, but in the choices of those who inhabit it. So the final question is not whether the algorithm is broken. It is. The question is whether you will allow it to break you, whether you will join the contagion of stupidity, or whether you will learn the discipline of wisdom in a time that rewards its opposite. To resist stupidity is to reclaim your mind. To practice digital wisdom is to live awake in a world that profits from your sleep. What have you done to help protect yourself from digital stupidity? Share your experience in the comments. Cipolla revealed the laws, Dunning and Kruger sketched the portrait, and Bonhoeffer sounded the warning. Together, their voices echo across decades, converging in our present moment. Stupidity is not new, but its scale is. What was once confined to rumor, to pamphlet, to propaganda, is now magnified by algorithms into a chorus that drowns out truth. The danger is not simply that the foolish speak, but that they are rewarded for speaking, while the wise are punished for their silence. And yet, the burden and the possibility remain yours. You cannot silence the tide of stupidity, but you can choose whether to be swept along by it or to plant yourself in resistance. Every share, every pause, every moment of reflection becomes a line of defense. Outrage will always demand your attention, but wisdom asks for something quieter, slower, harder. It asks for the courage to think, even when thinking feels futile. This is the paradox of our age. The very system that magnifies stupidity also makes wisdom possible at a scale no other century has known. The question, then, is not whether truth can survive. It can. The question is whether you will help it. Thank you for walking this path with me tonight. Until next time, may your silence be deliberate, your words chosen with care, and your attention guarded as the treasure it truly is.